Daniel Morris had been standing in the Galactic Council chamber for 3 hours, and his patience was wearing thin. The massive dome-shaped room stretched above him with seats arranged in circular tiers where representatives from 40 different species sat and watched. Some had multiple eyes, some had scales, some looked like they were made of living crystal. All of them were staring at him with expressions that ranged from suspicion to outright hostility. He was tired. Tired of the accusations. Tired of the fear. Tired of being treated like a threat when humanity had done nothing but help these people for 15 years. His gray suit felt too tight and his jaw ached from keeping his expression neutral. Behind him near the entrance stood Captain Jake Henderson, with 6 human security officers. Jake's hand never strayed far from his sidearm, and his eyes constantly scanned the room for threats. That was what 15 years of service to the Council had earned. Them, the need to watch their backs even in the air. Heart of galactic government, the Zynthian Chancellor Krelvan raised one of his 4 arms to silence the murmuring crowd. His skin was purple and covered in small ridges that rippled when he spoke. His 3 eyes focused on Daniel with obvious disdain. The Chancellor had never liked humans, and now he finally had the political support to do something about it. He touched a control panel, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a map of Council space. The human expansion must be contained, Krelvan announced, and his voice echoed through the chamber. In 15 years, they have claimed 12 colony worlds. They build weapons that make our own fleets obsolete. Their economy grows while ours stagnates. Their population increases while ours remains stable. They are a threat to the balance of power in Council space. Daniel wanted to laugh. A threat to the balance. Humanity had saved that balance more times than he could count. But he kept his mouth shut and listened. He knew where this was going. The Pelthoran representative clicked her mandibles together in agreement. She looked like a massive praying mantis with silver armor plating and too many joints in her limbs. I propose tariffs on all human trade goods, she said. 70% on raw materials, 90% on manufactured technology, 100% on weapon systems. We must protect our own industries, more voices joined in. The Quellan delegate suggested limiting human access to jump gates. The Mordian representative wanted humans banned from certain sectors of space entirely. Each species had a complaint. Each one had a proposal to restrict human activity, and each proposal was met with enthusiastic support from the others. Colonel Lisa Martinez stood next to Jake, and Daniel could see her fists clenched so tight her knuckles had turned white. She was the military liaison between Earth and the Council, and she had spent a decade watching the Council military fall apart, while human forces did all the real work. She had trained alien officers who showed no gratitude. She had planned defensive operations that protected species who now called her kind a threat. He caught her eye and shook his head slightly. Not yet. Stay calm. The vote came on the first major proposal, limiting human colonies to their current 12 worlds with no further expansion permitted. The holographic display showed the results as each representative cast their vote. Green lights appeared one after another around the chamber. 40 votes in favor, 0 against. The motion passed unanimously among non-human members. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. So that was how it was going to be. The second vote restricted human military vessels to designated patrol routes only. No independent operations, no exploration of new space, no freedom of movement. It passed just as easily. The third vote imposed the trade tariffs. The fourth vote required human technology transfers to be approved by a council committee before implementation. Every single measure designed to cage humanity like a dangerous animal passed without a single dissenting voice. Then came the final vote, and Daniel knew this one would be the end. Chancellor Krelvan stood and gestured to the holographic map. The human defense fleet has protected Council space for 12 years, he said, and his tone made it clear he thought this was a bad thing. But we no longer require their protection. The fleet is too powerful and answers only to human command. This represents an unacceptable security risk. I move that the human defense fleet be disbanded immediately, and all military assets be transferred to Council command or removed from Council space. The debate lasted less than 10 minutes. A few representatives made token protests about the value of human military service, but their hearts were not in it. The Zynthian Chancellor reminded everyone how dangerous humans were. The Pelthoran representative spoke about independence and self-determination. The Quellan delegate worried about human weapons being used against Council members. Daniel watched the vote tally appear. 40 green lights. The motion passed. They wanted the human military gone. But they still expected humans to provide technology. Still expected human doctors to cure their diseases. Still expected human engineers to maintain their stations and their ships. Still expected human traders to supply their markets. They wanted all the benefits of having humanity in the council with none of the power or influence that came from being equals. Daniel took a slow breath and stood up. The chamber fell silent. Every eye and sensor focused on him. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked around at the assembled representatives. Some looked smug. Some looked nervous. A few looked ashamed, but not enough to have voted differently. The United Earth government has heard the will of this council, Daniel said, and his voice was calm and clear. You have made your position abundantly clear. You fear us. You resent our success. You want our help, but not our presence. You want our protection, but not our ships. You want our innovation, but not our independence. He paused and let the words sink in. Chancellor Krelvan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Therefore, Daniel continued, I am authorized to inform this council that the United Earth government formally withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We will vacate all council facilities within 30 days. All defense agreements are terminated. All trade agreements are void. All technology sharing programs are ended. All human personnel will return to Earth territory. Good luck managing without us. The chamber erupted into chaos. Voices shouted in a dozen languages. The Pelthoran representative stood and clicked her mandibles in alarm. The Quellan delegate waved his tentacles frantically. Chancellor Krelvan banged his gavel, but no one paid attention. Daniel turned and walked toward the exit. Jake and Lisa fell in step beside him along with the security detail. Behind them, the shouting grew louder. Someone called for Daniel to come back. Someone else called for a recount of the votes. A third voice demanded that humanity be prevented from leaving. Should we respond, sir? Jake asked quietly as they reached the door. No, Daniel said. We are done talking. They walked out of the Galactic Council chamber and did not look back. Within an hour, the orders went out to every human ship, every human colony, every human facility in council space. Pack up, delete the files. Disable the equipment, come home. The council had made their choice, and now they would live with the consequences. Daniel sat in his shuttle as it lifted away from the council station and looked down at the massive structure below. Hundreds of species lived and worked there in the peace and prosperity that human sacrifice had made possible. They would learn very soon what the galaxy was like without humanity standing between them and the darkness. He felt no satisfaction, no anger. Just a cold certainty that the council had made the worst mistake in their history, and by the time they realized it, there would be nothing anyone could do to fix it. Admiral Kyle Peterson received the withdrawal order at 400 hours, while the UES Defender was on patrol near the Outer Rim. He read the message twice to make sure he understood it correctly, and then called his senior officers to the bridge. The massive warship hummed with activity as crew members moved through corridors and checked systems. They had been out here for 8 months protecting council space from pirates and raiders and hostile forces that most council species did not even know existed. All human vessels are to withdraw from council space immediately, Kyle told his officers as they gathered around the tactical display. We have 30 days to complete the evacuation. Every ship, every station, every outpost. Nothing gets left behind. Commander Greg Turner looked at the star map showing their current defensive positions. Sir, that is the entire Outer Rim defense line. If we pull back, there will be nothing between council space and the Kryn Syndicate. They have been waiting for an opportunity like this for years. Kyle nodded. I am aware. But those are our orders. The council voted to disband the human defense fleet, so we are giving them exactly what they asked for. The orders went out within the hour, and across council space human ships began powering up their engines and plotting jump coordinates back to Earth territory. Patrol vessels abandoned their routes. Escort ships left their convoys. Battle groups pulled back from forward positions. The largest military redeployment in human history was underway, and it was happening fast. On the research station, Kepler 9 Dr. Helen Brooks stood in her laboratory and looked at 15 years of work. The walls were covered with data screens, showing genetic sequences and molecular structures and treatment protocols. Her team had developed cures for 17 different alien diseases. They had created vaccines that saved billions of lives. They had shared every breakthrough freely with Council medical facilities, and now they were deleting it all. "Are you sure about this?" asked Dr. Peter Yang as he stood at his workstation with his finger hovering over the delete command. Helen looked at him and her expression was hard. "They voted to kick us out. They do not get to keep our research. Delete everything, every file, every backup, every sample. If they want our medical knowledge, they should have treated us better." Peter pressed the button and the screens began going dark, one by one. Across the station, 200 human scientists and doctors were doing the same thing. Decades of collaborative research vanished in minutes. The council members who worked alongside them watched in horror as the humans methodically erased every trace of their contributions. Some tried to protest, but the humans ignored them. The work was theirs and they were taking it with them. Commander Greg Turner oversaw the withdrawal from the Outer Rim defensive line from the bridge of the UES Guardian. 32 human ships had held this line for 6 years. They had fought off countless raids. They had protected trade routes. They had maintained peace in the most dangerous region of Council space. Now they were leaving and taking their defensive platforms with them. "Deactivate Grid 7, Greg ordered, and watched as another cluster of automated defense stations powered down. The platforms had been built with human technology and were keyed to human command codes. Without those codes, they were just expensive scrap metal floating in space. "Sir, the Pelthoran Patrol is hailing us," his communications officer reported. "They want to know why we are shutting down the defense grid." Greg smiled without humor. "Tell them we are following Council orders. The human defense fleet is being disbanded. These platforms are human property and we are deactivating them before we leave." The response came back quickly and the Pelthoran commander sounded panicked. "You cannot leave the Outer Rim undefended. The Kryn will attack within days." "Then I suggest you defend it yourselves," Greg replied and closed the channel. His ships finished powering down the last platforms and then jumped away, leaving nothing but empty space where humanity's defensive line had stood. Ambassador Claire Foster walked through the human embassy on the Council homeworld and supervised the evacuation. Staff members packed files and equipment into cargo containers. Security teams escorted diplomats to waiting shuttles. Everything of value was being removed. Everything else was being destroyed. She stopped in her office and looked at the walls covered with photos from 15 years of diplomatic functions, meetings with alien leaders, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, all of it built on the hope that humanity could be a valued member of the galactic community. That hope was dead now. She picked up her personal datapad and accessed the diplomatic network. With a few commands, she terminated every trade agreement between Earth and Council species. Hundreds of contracts worth trillions of credits vanished. Supply chains that had taken years to establish collapsed instantly. She felt a moment of satisfaction as she imagined the chaos this would cause in Council markets. Her assistant stepped into the office. "Ambassador, the last shuttle is ready. We are the only humans left on the planet." Claire took one last look around and then followed him out. They sealed the embassy doors behind them and Claire activated the security lockdown. Anyone who tried to enter would find empty rooms and wiped computers. The Council could have the building, but they would find nothing useful inside. On Earth, President Nathan Cole stood in the Situation Room and watched reports flowing in from across Council space. Every human installation was reporting successful evacuation. Ships were returning home loaded with personnel and equipment. The withdrawal was ahead of schedule and proceeding smoothly. He had expected the Council to try to interfere, but so far they had done nothing except send increasingly frantic messages asking humanity to reconsider. "Mr. President, the communication from Chancellor Krelvan," his aide said and handed him a datapad. Nathan read the message and laughed. "He wants us to delay the withdrawal while they reconsider their vote. He says the Council may have acted hastily. Are you going to respond, sir?" "No," Nathan said. "They had their chance to treat us with respect. They made their choice. Now they live with it." He pulled up the public address system and prepared to speak to the entire human population. Billions of people across Earth and the 12 colonies would hear his words. "Citizens of Earth," he began, and his voice was calm and strong. "Today marks the end of our participation in the Galactic Council. For 15 years, we served faithfully. We protected species that feared us. We healed diseases for people who resented us. We shared our knowledge with those who saw us as a threat. But service without respect is slavery, and we are no one's slaves. He paused and looked directly into the camera. Every human in Council space is coming home. Our ships, our technology, our knowledge, all of it returns to Earth territory. The Council wanted us gone, so we are leaving. Completely. Totally. Permanently. They will not have our protection anymore. They will not have our medicine. They will not have our innovation. They asked us to leave, and we are honoring that request. The broadcast ended, and Nathan sat back in his chair. Reports continued flowing in. The UES Defender had jumped back into Earth space with Admiral Kyle Peterson reporting successful withdrawal from the Outer Rim. Dr. Helen Brooks confirmed that Kepler-9 was evacuated and all research deleted. Commander Greg Turner reported the defensive platforms were deactivated and his battle group was en route home. Ambassador Claire Foster was 2 hours from Earth orbit. "Sir, we are receiving thousands of messages from Council species," his aide reported. "Private companies, local governments, individual citizens, they all want to maintain relationships with humanity." "Tell them all the same thing," Nathan said. "The United Earth government has withdrawn from Council space. We are not accepting new agreements at this time." 3 weeks after Daniel Morris walked out of the Council chamber, the last human transport jumped away from Council space. Not a single human remained behind. Not one ship, not one station, not one outpost. Humanity had packed up everything and gone home. The Council had wanted them gone and gotten exactly what they asked for, and now they would learn what the galaxy was like without human protection. Without human medicine. Without human technology. Without the one species that had held their fragile alliance together through sheer determination and sacrifice. Kyle Peterson stood on the bridge of the Defender as Earth came into view and felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief at being home, pride in his crew's professionalism during the withdrawal, but also sadness at what could have been if the Council had chosen differently. He pushed those feelings aside. There was work to do. The human fleet needed to be reorganized. Their own space needed to be fortified. And if he knew anything about the galaxy they had just left behind, it was about to descend into chaos. The Kryn Syndicate attacked exactly 48 hours after the last human ship left the Outer Rim. Their fleet of 200 warships jumped into the sector that had been protected by Commander Greg Turner's battle group and found nothing waiting for them. No human vessels, no defensive platforms, no resistance at all, just empty space and undefended Council colonies ripe for plunder. Admiral Thexnor of the Pelthoran fleet received the distress calls in his comfortable office on the Council homeworld. He had been celebrating the removal of human military forces with his staff when the first reports came in. 3 colonies under attack, civilian casualties mounting, raiders landing ground forces. He immediately ordered his fleet to respond and felt confident that his 90 ships would be more than adequate to handle. A pirate force, he was wrong. The Pelthoran fleet arrived 6 hours later, and Thexnor was shocked at what he found. The Kryn had completely overwhelmed the colonial defenses and were systematically looting everything of value. When his ships moved to engage, the raiders turned on them with a ferocity he had never experienced. The Kryn had been fighting humans for years, and had learned to be fast and brutal and efficient. The Pelthorans had been doing ceremonial patrols and training exercises. The battle lasted 6 hours, and ended with Thexnor retreating in humiliation. He had lost 23 ships. The Kryn had lost 4. His remaining vessels were damaged and his crew was demoralized. He sent an emergency message back to the Council requesting immediate reinforcements and better weapons and tactical support. The response came back quickly. There were no reinforcements available. Every Council species had reduced their military over the years because humans had been handling the real fighting. Now there was no one left to send. On the Vardeshi homeworld, the plague returned with a vengeance just 9 days after. Dr. Helen Brooks evacuated Kepler-9. The disease had been eradicated 5 years earlier, thanks to the vaccine her team developed. But viruses mutate, and this new strain was different enough that the old vaccine did not work. The Vardeshi medical teams pulled up the research files that Helen had shared with them. and discovered that all the detailed data was missing. The humans had only provided the final vaccine formula, but not the underlying research that would allow them to develop a new version. Dr. Shankara was the head of Vardeshi Medical Research, and he tried everything he could think of. He analyzed the old vaccine. He studied the new viral strain. He consulted with medical experts from other species. Nothing worked. The plague spread from one city to another and then to neighboring planets. Within 3 weeks, 8 million Vardeshi were dead, and the number was climbing every day. He sent a desperate message to Earth begging for help. The response was brief and formal. The United Earth government is not currently accepting requests for assistance from Council species. He read it 3 times, hoping he had misunderstood, but the meaning was clear. The humans were not coming to help. His people would have to solve this problem themselves or die trying. The trade routes collapsed next. The shipping lanes that connected Council space had been safe for years because human patrol vessels kept the pirates away, and human intelligence networks tracked criminal activity. Now those patrols were gone and those networks were silent. Merchant ships began disappearing. First a few per week, then a few per day. Insurance companies raised their rates by 300%. Many shipping companies simply refused to operate in certain sectors. The economic impact was immediate and devastating. The Quellan colonies depended on food imports from agricultural worlds 3 jumps away. Those shipments stopped coming when the shipping companies declared the route too dangerous. Within a month, the Quellan were facing food shortages. The Mordian industrial worlds needed raw materials that came from mining operations in the Outer Rim. Those materials stopped flowing when the mines were seized by raiders. Factories shut down. Workers lost jobs. The economy spiraled downward. Chancellor Krelvan called an emergency council session, and the chamber that had been so confident a month earlier was now filled with panicked representatives. The Pelthoran delegate reported that Admiral Thexnor had failed to secure the Outer Rim and was requesting support that did not exist. The Vardeshi representative spoke about the plague with tears streaming down his face. The Quellan delegate warned about food riots. One by one, each species reported disasters that were spiraling out of control. "We must take action," Krelvan announced, and his voice was less confident than before. "We will rebuild our military forces. We will establish new defensive positions. We will develop our own medical research. We will secure our own trade routes. We are not helpless." But they were helpless, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Building a military took years. Training soldiers took time. Developing new technologies required expertise they did not have. And all of this required resources they could not spare while dealing with immediate crises. The Pelthoran representative stood, and her mandibles clicked in agitation. "We need to contact the humans. Request their assistance. Perhaps if we explain the situation, they will reconsider." Krelvan's face darkened. "We will not beg. We made a decision based on sound reasoning. The humans were too powerful and too dangerous. That has not changed. We will manage without them." "At what cost?" the Vardeshi delegate asked quietly. "My people are dying. Millions of them. The humans could stop this plague in weeks. Instead, we watch our children die because we were too proud to treat them with respect." The argument went back and forth for hours, but nothing was decided. The council could not agree on whether to contact humanity. Some species wanted to apologize and request help. Others insisted they could solve their problems without human assistance. A few suggested offering trade concessions or political agreements in exchange for limited support. In the end, they decided to wait and see if the situation improved on its own. It did not improve. It got worse. The technology sector was the next domino to fall. Council species had become dependent on human innovations over the years. Quantum processors that powered their computers, gravity manipulation systems that made their ships faster, medical scanners that diagnosed diseases, energy shields that protected their stations. All of it had been provided by human companies and human engineers. And all of it required maintenance and updates and technical support that no longer existed. On the station, Nexus 7 Chief Engineer Calvex watched his power systems fail one by one. The quantum processor that managed the station's energy grid was showing errors. He tried to fix it, but the technology was beyond his understanding. He pulled up the technical manual that the human engineers had left behind and found it was written at such an advanced level that he could barely comprehend it. The humans had not intentionally made it difficult. They had simply written it for other humans who understood the underlying principles. Council engineers had never bothered to learn those principles, because humans were always available to fix things. The power failed completely 6 hours later, and Nexus 7 had to be evacuated. 20,000 residents scrambled for escape pods and shuttles. 300 people died in the chaos. The station that had been a hub of trade and culture for decades became a dead hulk floating in space. And it was not the only one. Across Council space stations and ships and facilities began failing as human technology broke down without proper maintenance. Commander Velkoth took command of the Outer Rim defensive line 2 months after the human withdrawal. He was a Xinthian military officer with 30 years of experience and a distinguished record. He studied the reports from Admiral Thexnor's failed engagement and developed what he thought was a sound strategy. He would establish defensive positions at key jump points. He would use his smaller forces' mobility to respond quickly to threats. He would coordinate with local colonial militias to provide ground support. His plan lasted exactly 3 days before the Kryn tore it apart. They did not attack where he expected. They did not follow predictable patterns. They hit multiple targets simultaneously, forcing him to split his forces. And when he responded, they ambushed his ships with tactics that Captain Jake Henderson had countered easily, but that Velkoth had never seen before. He lost 40 ships in the first week. His defensive positions were overrun. His colonial militias were slaughtered. He sent increasingly desperate messages back to the Council, begging for reinforcements and supplies and tactical advice. The responses were sympathetic but useless. The Council had nothing to send. Their military reserves were depleted. Their production facilities could not keep up with demand. And their strategic expertise had walked out the door with the humans. By the end of the 3rd month after humanity's departure, 6 Council species faced existential threats. 12 colonies had fallen to raiders. Trade had dropped by 60%. The Vardeshi plague had killed 23 million. The economy was in freefall. And the proud Galactic Council that had rejected humanity with such confidence was collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance. In the Council chamber, Chancellor Krelvin stared at the reports and finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. The humans had not been a threat. They had been the only thing holding the Council together. And now they were gone. 3 months had passed since humanity left, and the Galactic Council chamber looked like a different place. The confident representatives who had voted to restrict human power were gone, and replaced by desperate leaders who understood that their civilization was dying. The air filtration system made strange noises, because the human technicians who maintained it were no longer available. Half the lights were dimmer than they should be, because replacement parts were stuck on a transport ship that had been captured by pirates. Even the Council building itself was falling apart without human expertise to keep it running. Chancellor Krelvin stood at his podium and looked out at the assembled representatives. His purple skin had lost some of its color, and the ridges on his face seemed deeper than before. He had aged 10 years and 3 months. "We face significant challenges," he began, and his voice lacked its former authority. "But we have faced challenges before. We survived long before humans arrived in our space. We will survive after they have departed. We are resilient. We are capable. We will adapt." Ambassador Shikal of the Pelthoran delegation rose to her feet and her mandibles clicked sharply. She had lost family members when Admiral Thexnor's fleet was destroyed. She had watched her species' economy collapse as trade routes became too dangerous. She was done pretending everything would be fine. "We survived before because we were small and isolated and beneath the notice of larger powers," she said, and her translator made her voice sound cold. "The humans helped us build something greater. An alliance, a civilization, an empire that stretched across dozens of sectors. Now that empire is collapsing and our enemies know we are vulnerable, we did not adapt to greatness on our own. The humans gave it to us, and we threw it away because we were afraid." Krelvin's 3 eyes narrowed. "The humans were becoming too powerful. They threatened the balance. We made the correct decision." "The correct decision?" Shikal's voice rose. 40 Council worlds have been attacked. 20 have fallen completely. The Vardeshi plague has killed over 30 million people. Our economy has shrunk by 70% in 3 months. Food shortages are causing riots on 6 different homeworlds. And you call this the correct decision? The chamber erupted in argument. Some representatives supported Krelvin and insisted they just needed more time. Others sided with Shikal and demanded they contact humanity immediately. The Vardeshi delegate sat quietly with his head in his hands. His people were dying by the thousands every day, and there was nothing he could do. The vaccine that could save them existed in human databases that his people could no longer access on the Vardeshi homeworld hospitals, overflowed with the sick and dying. Dr. Shankara worked 18-hour shifts trying to slow the plague, but it was like trying to stop an ocean with his bare hands. Every patient he saved was replaced by 10 more. The medical staff was exhausted. Supplies were running low, and worst of all, they had no hope of finding a cure on their own. The research was simply beyond their current capabilities. He stood in a hospital corridor and watched parents holding their dying children. A father sang softly to his daughter as her breathing became shallow. A mother stroked her son's head and whispered promises that everything would be fine, even though they both knew it was a lie. Shankara had sent 3 more messages to Earth begging for help. All 3 had been ignored. The humans were not cruel. They simply did not care anymore. And why should they? The Council had made it clear that humanity was not wanted. Commander Velkoth sent his daily report from the Outer Rim and tried to keep the desperation out of his voice. He had lost another 6 ships in a Kryn ambush. His defensive line now consisted of 32 vessels trying to cover territory that had required 300 human ships. The math was simple and brutal. He could not win. He could only delay the inevitable and hope that somehow reinforcements would arrive before his entire force was destroyed. His tactical officer approached with the latest intelligence report. Sir, the Kryn are massing forces in Sector 9. We estimate at least 80 ships preparing for a major offensive. Velkoth looked at his own force disposition and felt sick. He had 12 ships in that sector. 12 ships against 80. The humans would have countered with overwhelming force and superior tactics. He had neither. Pull back to defensive position Gamma, he ordered. Evacuate all civilian populations from the projected attack zone. We cannot hold that sector. Sir, if we abandon Sector 9, the Kryn will have a direct route to the core worlds. I am aware, Velkoth said quietly. But we do not have the ships to stop them. Send another request to the Council for reinforcements. They both knew that request would be denied, just like all the others. There were no reinforcements. The Council military had been cut to the bone over the years because humans handled all the dangerous work. Now that expertise was gone and could not be replaced quickly, training a soldier took months. Building a warship took years. Developing tactical doctrine took decades. And they did not have decades. They barely had weeks. The economic crisis deepened as the 4th month approached. The Quellan colonies were experiencing widespread famine because food shipments could not get through. The government tried to ration supplies, but riots broke out when people realized how little food remained. On Quellan Prime, the capital city descended into chaos as hungry citizens stormed government buildings demanding solutions that did not exist. The Mordian industrial worlds faced a different crisis. Their factories had shut down for lack of raw materials. Millions of workers sat idle. The government tried to maintain order by providing emergency credits, but those credits bought nothing when there were no goods to purchase. The social safety net that had functioned smoothly for generations began to tear apart. Some council species began to fracture internally. The Xinthian colony worlds questioned why they should remain loyal to a government that could not protect them. Several colonies declared independence and tried to negotiate separate peace agreements with the Kryn. It did not work. The pirates took what they wanted and left nothing behind, but the fact that colonies were willing to abandon the council showed how far things had deteriorated. In the council chamber, the debates continued without resolution. Chancellor Krelvan still refused to admit their mistake. We need to be patient, he insisted. Our new military training programs will produce results. Our research teams will find solutions. Our economy will stabilize. These are temporary setbacks. But fewer representatives believed him with each passing day. The Pelthoran delegation called for his removal. The Vardeshi delegates supported them. The Quellan representative said his government would leave the council entirely if something did not change soon. Even some of Krelvan's own Xinthian supporters began to waver. Finally, Ambassador Shikal made a formal motion. I propose we send an official diplomatic delegation to Earth. We will request negotiations to restore some form of cooperation. We do not need to rejoin as we were, but we need their help. Our people are dying. The chamber fell silent. This was the moment they had all been avoiding, admitting they were wrong, asking for help from the species they had rejected, acknowledging that they could not survive without humanity. Krelvan stood and his voice was harsh. We will not beg. The humans left because they chose to leave. If they cared about the council, they would have stayed. We will solve our problems ourselves. With what? Shikal demanded. Our military is defeated. Our economy is destroyed. Our people are starving and sick and dying. What exactly will we use to solve these problems? Pride. Pride does not stop bullets. Pride does not cure disease. Pride does not feed hungry children. The vote was called, and for the first time since humanity left, the council was genuinely divided. 18 species voted to contact Earth. 17 voted against. 5 abstained. The motion passed by the narrowest possible margin. Krelvan watched the vote tally and knew his time as Chancellor was over. He had led the council to disaster and could no longer command their confidence. Within hours, the coalition government would remove him and appoint someone else, someone willing to do what he could not, someone willing to admit they had made a terrible mistake. The message was drafted carefully. It avoided actual apologies but expressed regret over the deterioration of human-council relations. It acknowledged the severe challenges facing council space. It requested a diplomatic meeting to discuss mutual cooperation and renewed partnership. It offered trade concessions and political considerations in exchange for assistance. The words were chosen to preserve as much dignity as possible while still asking for help. The message was sent to Earth, and then they waited. Days passed with no response. Then weeks. The council representatives checked constantly for any reply. None came. The silence from Earth was absolute and terrifying. It meant that humanity was not ignoring them out of spite. Humanity simply did not care anymore. The council had burned their bridges, and now they were learning that some bridges could not be rebuilt. Ambassador Daniel Morris sat in his office on Earth and watched the message from the Galactic Council play for the third time. 6 months had passed since he walked out of that chamber, and he had not missed it for a single moment. The message was professionally worded and carefully diplomatic. It talked about mutual cooperation and renewed partnership. It mentioned the challenges facing council space. It suggested a meeting to discuss future arrangements. What it did not do was apologize. President Nathan Cole stood by the window looking out at the city below. Admiral Kyle Peterson sat in a chair reviewing the strategic reports from council space. They had all read the message, and they all understood what it really meant. The council was dying and wanted humanity to save them, but they still could not bring themselves to admit they had been wrong. They are not sorry they rejected us, Daniel said quietly. They are sorry they need us. There is a difference. Nathan turned from the window. What do you recommend? Daniel leaned back in his chair. We tell them no. We withdrew from council space. That decision is final. They made their choice and now they live with it. Kyle nodded in agreement. Our intelligence shows the council has lost effective control of 40% of their former territory. The Kryn Syndicate is now the dominant military power in that region. The Vardeshi plague has killed over 40 million. Their economy has collapsed. Even if we wanted to help them, the damage is too extensive. It would take decades to rebuild what they have lost in 6 months. Nathan walked to his desk and sat down. Draft a response. Keep it brief. We acknowledge their message. We are not interested in rejoining the council or resuming previous arrangements. We wish them well. Nothing more, Daniel smiled slightly. That is going to cause a panic when they receive it. Good, Nathan said. Maybe next time they will think twice before rejecting the people who keep them safe. The message was sent 3 hours later. In the council chamber, the new Chancellor Velthas read it twice, hoping she had misunderstood. She was a Quellan who had been appointed after Krelvan's removal. Her tentacles trembled as she processed the words. The humans were not coming back. Not now, not ever. The council had burned that bridge, and humanity had no interest in rebuilding it. She called an emergency session and read the message aloud to the assembled representatives. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Some had expected this response, but hearing it officially made it real. Ambassador Shikal closed her eyes and her mandibles clicked softly in grief. The Vardeshi delegate made a sound like a sob. Even those who had opposed contacting humanity looked shaken. What do we do now? Someone asked, and their voice was small and defeated. Velthas had no answer. The council was dying, and the one species that could save them had refused. There were no other options. No backup plans, no miracle solutions. They would either find a way to survive on their own or they would collapse completely. Those were the only choices remaining. On Earth, humanity had moved on. The 6 months since withdrawal had been productive. Free from council restrictions, the 12 colonies expanded rapidly. New settlements were established on virgin worlds. Mining operations extracted resources without bureaucratic oversight. Research facilities developed technologies without committee approval. The human economy was booming. Captain Jake Henderson commanded the new defensive perimeter around human territory. His fleet was smaller than the force that had protected council space, but it was concentrated and efficient. When a Kryn raiding party tested their borders, Jake's ships destroyed them so completely that wreckage was scattered across 3 star systems. The surviving pirates limped home and spread the word that human space was forbidden territory. No one tested that border again. The message was clear to anyone paying attention. Humanity would defend its own with absolute ruthlessness. The restraint they had shown while protecting the council was gone. Now they fought only for themselves, and they fought to win. Enemy ships that entered human space did not get warnings or second chances. They got destroyed. Dr. Helen Brooks worked in her new laboratory on Mars developing treatments for human diseases. She did not think about the Vardeshi plague except occasionally late at night when she could not sleep. She knew she could solve it. Her team had the expertise and the resources. But the Vardeshi were not her people anymore. The council had made that clear when they voted to disband the human defense fleet. She felt guilty sometimes, but not guilty enough to offer help that would be rejected anyway. Admiral Kyle Peterson reviewed reports from council space and watched their civilization fall apart in real time. The Kryn now controlled most of the outer rim. The Vardeshi plague had spread to 8 species. Food riots were common. Several colonies had been completely abandoned. The council military was down to fewer than 200 operational ships trying to cover territory that had required 3,000. It was a slow-motion catastrophe, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. "Do you think we should help them, sir?" his tactical officer asked one day. Kyle considered the question. They did not want our help when we offered it freely. They called us dangerous and aggressive and a threat to peace. They voted us out. Now they want us to come back and fix their problems. But here is the thing, we are not their servants. We are not their tools. We are a sovereign people who deserve respect, and you do not get respect by begging for help only after you realize you need it. The officer nodded. "So we just watch them collapse?" "Yes," Kyle said. "We watch, we learn, and we remember, because someday other species will ask to join us, and when they do, we will tell them this story. We will explain what happened when people took us for granted. It will be a lesson about respect and consequences." In council space, the situation continued to deteriorate. Chancellor Velthus tried everything she could think of. She reorganized the military. She negotiated trade agreements with species outside the council. She implemented emergency economic measures. Nothing worked. The problems were too large and too complex. The council needed the kind of expertise that only humanity possessed, and humanity was not sharing anymore. The Vardeshi plague eventually burned itself out after killing 62 million people. Not because anyone found a cure, but because it ran out of hosts to infect. The survivors were traumatized and broken. Their civilization would take generations to recover if it recovered at all. Dr. Shenkara died treating patients in a hospital that had run out of medicine and power and hope. His last thoughts were of the message he had sent to Dr. Helen Brooks begging for help. A message that was never answered. Commander Velkoth died defending a colony in the Outer Rim. His force of 8 ships faced a Kryn fleet of 60. He knew he could not win, but he fought anyway because that was his duty. His last transmission was a request for reinforcements that would never come. The Kryn took the colony and enslaved the survivors. It was one of 14 colonies that fell that month. The economic collapse reached its lowest point when the Quellan government declared bankruptcy. Their currency became worthless overnight. The food riots turned into full rebellion as colonies refused to obey a government that could not protect them. The Quellan civilization that had flourished for centuries fragmented into dozens of independent systems. Some survived. Many did not. 2 years after humanity's withdrawal, the Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. 20 species remained as members, but they controlled less territory than they had before humans arrived. The rest had either collapsed completely or abandoned the council to seek their own paths. The Grand Alliance that had once stretched across hundreds of light years was gone. Historians would later call it the Great Collapse, and debate what could have been done differently. But everyone agreed on one thing. The Council's decision to reject humanity was the worst mistake in galactic history. They had possessed something rare and valuable, a species willing to sacrifice for others, a people who shared their knowledge freely, a civilization that valued cooperation over domination, and they had thrown it away because they were afraid. On Earth, humanity built its own civilization according to its own values. The colonies expanded to 30 systems within 5 years. Trade flourished. Technology advanced. The population grew, and when new species eventually requested to join what became known as the Human Commonwealth, they were welcomed, with one absolute condition: mutual respect or nothing at all. The first species to join was the Pelthoran, delegation led by Ambassador Shikal. She came to Earth personally and did what the Council had never been willing to do. She apologized, not with carefully worded diplomatic language but with genuine remorse. She acknowledged that her people had been wrong. She asked not for charity, but for the chance to prove they had learned from their mistakes. President Nathan Cole listened to her speech and saw the sincerity in her alien eyes. "You understand that we will not be your protectors anymore," he said. "We will be your partners, equal partners. You contribute as much as we do, or you do not belong here." Shikal clicked her mandibles in agreement. "We understand. We do not want protection. We want to stand beside you as equals. That is what we should have done 15 years ago."